Hey guys, tonight we slip into the soft, whispering dark behind a medieval tavern, where the air is thick with spilt ale, smoke, and something much colder intent. You're pressed against a mossy stone wall, the slop of the kitchen drain pooling. Near your boots, and a voice low, casual, too close asks if you're ready to kill someone tonight. You don't nod. You don't breathe. The only thing louder than your heartbeat is the scrape of metal against your ribs. There's no warm-up act in this world. No training montage. You don't get to say, hang on, I need a little practice. First, you say yes, or you don't wake up at all. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it where you are? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're a nobody. That's your greatest weapon. The world forgets your face the second it turns away. You move through the market like fog, slow, harmless, forgettable. But behind your sleeve is a thin dagger dipped in something expensive. Under your breath are the names of men who might die tomorrow. You were recruited, if you can call it that, by a man who never said his name, only offered a test. Pickpocket the tavern master and slip the coin into the priest's cassock without getting caught. You passed, barely. He never smiled, just placed a hand on your shoulder and whispered, "You'll do." And now, standing in this alley, you understand the real test comes later. Your first target? A low-ranking squire with the unfortunate habit of betting noblemen's wives. An easy job, your handler says. A warm-up. He leaves you a simple blade, worn hilt wrapped in dyed cord, and a warning. No blood on the face, no noise, no questions. You tail the squire to the bathhouse, where the steam does more than fog the windows, it cloaks sign. You wait until he's distracted, laughing with a girl who's far too bored to be a spy, and slip in. The dagger doesn't glide like stories say, it snags. The squire turns, eyes wild, and grabs your wrist. You twist, panic flooding your chest like cold water, and push harder. He gasps, not dramatically, just like someone surprised, and crumples. You don't breathe until the water in the tub is still again. You make it back to the alley, hard in your throat, and your handler isn't there. Just a rat chewing on an apple core and a small cloth pouch tucked behind a crate. Inside is coin, your name etched on the leather drawstring. You should feel triumph. You don't. Your hands smell like blood and tallow. That night, in the flickering glow of a dying candle, you hear something strange, the ghost of the squire's laugh, echoing in your ear, softer than wind. Here's the first thing history books don't teach you. Medieval assassins weren't all trained killers with code names and guild support. Many were desperate peasants, wronged lovers, greedy mercenaries, anyone with a steady hand and a shaky conscience. Some were even forced by nobles as part of petty revenge plots. Others volunteered, for money or meaning. And then there's, you doubt the second thing? Most didn't live long enough to gain a reputation. A rare manuscript kept in a Prague Abbey scholars still debate its authenticity lists. 16 unsanctioned murders across Bohemia during the 1300s, all carried out, it claims, by phantoms in linen. Every assassin named in the margins died within 2 years of their first kill. Execution, betrayal, or mysteriously vanishing in the woods. Probably eaten by boars, or so the monk cheerily notes. You're now one of them. A ghost in linen. A whisper behind a whisper. But even whispers have ears. Later that week, a stranger bumps into you in the market. Too clumsy. Too deliberate. That night, someone tries your door. It doesn't open, but it rattles. You sleep with the dagger under your pillow now, the hilt damp from your palms. You thought you'd kill once, get paid, disappear. But you didn't disappear. You got noticed, and in this world, that's the beginning of the end. Your next assignment arrives tucked inside a hollowed-out loaf of bread. You don't notice it at first. The loaf sits on your table next to a chipped clay mug and a bowl of cold lentils. You almost tear into it until the weight shifts wrong. In your hand, bread doesn't clink. Inside is a folded square of parchment tied with red thread. One line only, north wall, dusk. Follow the drunk. That's it. No name, no amount, no clue who wrote it. And yet, here you are just before sundown lurking, behind a barrel that smells like vinegar and mold, watching the city wall like it owes you answers. You spot him. Sloppy gait, ale-soaked tunic, muttering at pigeons. Definitely your man. You follow at a distance, stepping in time with the clink of his boots. He turns down a narrow lane, just wide enough for regrets, and stops at a garden gate. He knocks. Waits, no answer. He glances once over his shoulder, then staggers inside. You slip in before the door fully closes. And that's your first mistake. You think this is another soft kill. A drunk target, an empty house. But inside is a nobleman's garden, wild and overgrown, with a bench made of stone and a silver bowl of water reflecting the rising moon. The drunk straightens up. His stagger disappears. He pulls off his hood and smirks, and then he lunges. Fall backward, barely avoiding the dagger meant for your gut. You scramble, grip your blade, and parry like you were never taught. He's fast drunk no more and far more skilled than the man you killed in the BATHOUS. He fights like someone with nothing left to lose. Eventually, luck tilts. Your blade catches his side. He gasps, stumbles, and collapses against a tree. He doesn't curse. He doesn't plead. He just smiles at you. Second job. He whispers, "You're already marked." Then he dies, and you realize he wasn't your target. You search his coat. No coin. No orders. Just a carved token in his pocket. A small wooden crescent moon with 3 notches. That's the second mistake. You took the wrong bait. Someone wanted you dead. Historians still argue whether medieval assassins were part of formal guilds or just hired blades used and discarded by the wealthy. Some scrolls speak of brotherhoods with codes and safe houses. Others claim most assassins were just pawns in feuds between powerful families. What's clear is this: once you step into the trade, someone's always watching. And someone always wants your head on a wall. You don't sleep that night. Or the one after. You clean your blade with shaking hands, over and over, until the metal gleams like gilt dot. By the 4th morning, there's another message, this one scrawled in chalk on your doorframe. A name, a location, no signature. You want to run. You don't, because here's the thing no one tells you. The first kill is hard. The second is harder. Not because of conscience, by now. That's mostly numb, but because you've seen how easily it can all go wrong. You trail your new target through a fog-choked market. He's older, wears robes, smells like parchment and mint. A scholar, maybe. A record keeper. No guards. No weapon. Too easy. You follow him into a scriptorium, where sunlight pools through colored glass and illuminates rows of open books. A monk snoozes near a fire. Quills float in jars. You step between shelves like a shadow, and your target turns around. You're early, he says calmly. He pulls a dagger from his sleeve. You hesitate. He doesn't. You both strike. His blade nicks your arm. Yours finds his throat. He gasps, soft and stunned, and sinks to the stone floor. You watch the ink from his robe soak into the cracks between tiles. It smells like myrrh and blood. You reach for his pouch. No coins, just papers. One bears your name. Another has a sketch, your sketch. Crude, but unmistakably you. The parchment reads, "Approved by council." You pocket the note. Heart-pounding. Your name is on a list. And that, you realize, is the beginning of the end for most assassins. They don't die in battle. They don't fall on their swords. They're cataloged, tracked, stamped like livestock until the right person decides it's time for them to go. The scholars call it the spiral. Once your name is known, your choice is narrow. You must either vanish completely, or become useful to someone powerful, enough to shield you. The third job is supposed to be easier. It isn't. You've stopped sleeping altogether. You barely eat. You flinch at footsteps. And yet, something inside you begins to settle. A strange calm. Like a coin balanced on its edge. You're starting to understand the rules of the game. Shame it won't help you survive it. You sharpen your blade by candlelight now, not because it's dull, but because the sound soft, rhythmic, scraping steel on stone helps your thoughts fall into a line you can follow. It's either that or listen to the wind whisper your name. through the cracks in the shutters. You don't trust the wind anymore. Or the shutters. Your next job arrives tucked inside a hollow coin. You nearly spend it on boiled onions before noticing the weight. With a pin and a little luck, you split the seam, and a curled scrap of vellum falls out. Baron Etienne, alone, at the wharf, midnight. No further instructions, no promises of payment. But you already know, if someone knows where to send this to. You don't ignore it. You make your way to the wharf through fog, so thick it might as well be wool. You keep to the shadows between barrels and crates, each footstep careful, deliberate. Every sound dripping water, groaning timber, a rat sneezing sounds like a death bell. There he is. Baron Etienne. Broad-shouldered, cloaked in sable, facing the river like he's waiting for a ghost ship. Alone, just as promised. You approach slowly, blade tucked behind your wrist, breath shallow. Then he speaks. I was hoping it would be you. You freeze. Turn around, he says, still facing the water. Slowly, you obey, and find 3 guards at your back, crossbows loaded. One yawns. Another nods at you like you're the main course. The third, a woman with a scar from eye to jaw, steps forward and plucks your blade from your hand with a grace that makes your stomach twist. I always wanted to meet the one they call the candle maker, Etienne says, finally turning to you. Blows out lights, never leaves wax. You've never heard that name before. You don't correct him. He walks up slowly, circles you like your livestock at a fair. Here's the part where you expect me to kill you, he says, smiling faintly. But you're lucky. I need a candle snuffed. The job? A rival merchant's son. Nothing personal, just business. Etienne offers no payment, only survival. If you refuse, he shrugs. They'll need ballast for tomorrow's shipment. You don't refuse. And just like that, you're working for a man who thinks of you as an object useful. For now, historians still argue whether nobles of the medieval period frequently employed assassins directly or merely turned a blind eye when accidents happened. Some letters, like the so-called Verdun fragments, seem to suggest regular use of hired blades among feuding families. Others argue these documents are forgeries, written centuries later to justify old grievances. You don't care. You're alive. You complete the job, fast, quiet, precise. You slit the merchant's son's throat while he's vomiting outside the tavern. The only witness is a goose, and you don't trust its silence either. 2 days later, another job. Then another. Etienne doesn't pay in coin. He pays in anonymity. You start sleeping better. Slightly. Enough to dream again, but the dreams aren't kind. They come in pieces. A pair of eyes watching you from a barn loft. A pool of blood shaped like a dog. A whisper that says your name in your mother's voice. You wake each time reaching for your dagger. Slicing open the air. You tell yourself this is the price of survival. You've stopped wondering what kind of person that makes you. One day, while passing through the tannery district, you see a man being dragged from a cart. He's beaten, gagged, and stripped to the waist. His back is covered in marks, each one an assassin's symbol. Some old, some fresh. The crowd jeers. Someone throws a boot. You keep walking. You don't look back. But hours later, sitting in the back of a butcher shop, waiting for Etienne's next errand, you sketch one of the symbols you saw on the man's skin. You know it. It was etched into the dagger you lost at the wharf. You start to wonder, how many others has Etienne employed? And how many met the river when their usefulness ran out? That night, a scroll arrives under your door, not sealed. Just rolled. It has only 4 words. Do not trust Etienne. You check the alley. Nothing. But in the distance, a dog barks 3 times. Then stops. A trick of the night. Maybe. Or a warning. You start planning. Quietly. Carefully. Because in this line of work, it's not just about killing. It's about choosing when to disappear. And how much of yourself to leave behind when you do. You never thought you'd miss sleeping in a pigsty. But tonight, crouched in a rain barrel outside the tavern cellar, because the roof you were hiding under collapsed from rot, you think fondly of that pigsty in Bruges where you once spent. A warm night and woke up with straw in your teeth, because at least pigs don't betray you. You've been on the run for 3 days. No new message from ATN. No payment. No bread tucked with poison. Not even a coin with your name inside. Just silence. Which, in your world, is louder than any scream. You started feeling it 2 nights ago, when you noticed the same beggar leaning against different doors in 3 parts of town. His face changed each time, once a cough, once a limp, once an empty stare, but his left boot always pointed slightly outward. Then the tailor's wife, who never speaks, told you, nice weather for disappearing. While it was raining. At midnight, that's when you knew. Someone had sent out the word. You're no longer the candle maker. You're the candle. You slip through town in borrowed clothes. Your dagger's gone dull. Your boots squeak. You can't afford to stay anywhere familiar, and the walls of the city feel closer every hour. You visit an old contact in the mill house, but he's gone fishing. His nephew closes the door too quickly. Eventually, you find refuge in a chapel that smells of wet dog and burning incense. You light no candles. You pray to no saints. You sleep in the choir loft with a bag of flour as your pillow and dream of nothing. When you wake, there's a woman standing beside you. Her cloak is damp. Her eyes are pale blue, like unwashed glass. She holds out a dried apple slice. Eat, she says. You'll need both hands free. She doesn't tell you her name. Only that she belongs to the guild. You scoff. Of course you do. Everyone claims the guild. The guild is like Atlantis, real if you believe in it, deadly if you don't. She smiles. We saw your ATN problem. You chew the apple slowly. Why help me? You ask. Because you lasted longer than we thought. She gives you a small parcel, a clean blade, a vial of yellow liquid, and a scrap of red ribbon. Your next job is ATN. You blink. You want me to kill him? She tilts her head. No, we want you to try. Historians still argue whether organized assassin guilds existed across medieval Europe, or if they're mostly the invention of later literature and paranoid noble correspondence. While sources like the Chronicle of Seraphin's Tongue mention the Black Ledger of the Silent Men, many scholars suggest this is metaphorical or allegorical. Still, there are real references, subtle, half-coded to networks of killers exchanging clients, symbols, and supplies. You've seen those symbols on bricks, etched into tree roots, even baked into the patterns of a tavern floor dot, so maybe this woman is lying. Or maybe she is the guild. Either way, you have one job, ATN. You follow him for a week. From the governor's estate to the bathhouse to the little villa outside town where his sister lives. You meet the real sister. She's been dead for 5 years. He moves like someone who owns everything he touches. Arrogant, predictable. You steal one of his handkerchiefs. Test it with the yellow liquid. It turns blue. Poison marker. He's already being tracked by someone else. By day 8, you're ready. You wait inside his private latrine. You're not proud. He enters humming a tune only rich men hum, something with vials and not enough rhythm. You strike fast. Not to kill. Just to mark. You slice the back of his leg, shallow, then disappear before he hits the floor. You leave. The red ribbon tied to the handle of his door dot the next day. The town crier announces the sudden departure of Baron Etienne to the countryside for health. You know better. He's dead or disappeared. The guild doesn't always kill. Sometimes they erase. And you? You're still breathing, but not free, because the woman finds you again. This time she asks for something harder. A man in the castle. A cousin of the prince. He's important, she says. Politically? You ask. No, she replies. To me. You don't ask because questions are dangerous, and you've just been promoted. You never meant to become anyone's favorite blade, but here you are, standing barefoot in a freezing stone corridor beneath the castle's kitchens, waiting for the bell that signals the end of the feast. You've been here for 2 hours, still, as a statue, back pressed against cold limestone. The candle in your hand has burned down to a nub. You don't light it again. Tonight's job isn't like the others. There's no quick jab in an alley, no clever disguise, no slipping poison. Into a mug. This one requires patience, timing, a familiarity with castle layout. You had to bribe 3 scullery boys and 1 limping guard to obtain your target. Lord Kaelric, cousin to the prince, known for his fondness of roasted swan and cruel jokes. at the servant's expense. He's the kind of man who laughs when someone spills wine and then has them whipped for daring to blush. The woman from the guild didn't offer you payment this time. She just handed you a signet ring, Caelrix, and said, return it when it's done, not before. That was 6 days ago. You hear the feast ending above. Chairs scrape, laughter swells and dies, plates clatter. You count 15 heartbeats. Then slip up the back stair. The castle is quieter than it should be. That's your first warning. You reach Caelrix's chamber. 2 guards stand watch, leaning lazily against the wall. One yawns. You don't need to kill them. You just need a distraction. You light a scrap of oiled cloth and toss it into the tapestry 2 halls down. It goes up with a soft fume. The guards run. You slip inside. Lord Caelrix is half undressed, humming to himself, looking into a polished silver mirror. He doesn't see you. You step forward, and then you freeze, because there's someone else in the room. A woman, veiled, sitting in the corner, silent, watching. You hesitate. Just long enough. Caelrix turns, sees you, his eyes narrow. Who sent you? He asks. You lunge. You're faster than him, but not faster than the woman. She moves like smoke, intercepts you mid-strike, and knocks your blade aside. You land hard, shoulder catching a marble bench, teeth clacking together. Then she's gone, disappeared through a side door like a phantom. Caelrix is on the ground, bleeding from the leg, howling like a kicked dog. Not dead. Not yet. You leave, fast, messy. The escape is clumsy. Down a servant's stair, through the kitchen, past a pig pen where a stable boy sees you. You stare him down until he turns away. You make it back to the city, barely, and that's when it hits. You, the guild was testing you again. Maybe the woman in the corner was the guild. Maybe Caelrix knew. Maybe the whole job was a staged performance just to see what you'd do when things went sideways, because that's the part no one tells you about surviving as an assassin in the Middle Ages. It's less about strength, more about how you fall, and how fast you get up. You meet the veiled woman again in the ruins of a bell tower, where ivy strangles the old stone and the wind carries secrets in all directions. She hands you the signet ring. She's wearing gloves now. You didn't kill him, she says. You wait for the punishment, but she just nods. You're learning restraint. You blink. That was restraint. Historians still argue whether figures like Caelrix, minor nobles, tied to royal blood, were often targets for blackmail, assassination, or forced disappearance. In some cases, like the infamous Bordeaux letters, the deaths of nobles were covered up with convenient diseases and hastily written eulogies. One death by assassination was recorded as choked on a duck bone, though a priest scribbled. Margin note reads, steel feather. You ask her the question that's been growing like mold in your chest. Why me? She considers. Then says, you don't run from chaos, you walk through it. You're not sure if that's a compliment or a warning. She leaves you with a new token. A sliver of wood painted black with a single red X on one side. You're to carry it in your boot until it's needed. You don't ask what that means. Instead, you find yourself climbing a church spire the next day, laying low for no good reason other than instinct. From up there, the city looks smaller, dirtier. Fragile dot, you wonder if that's how the guild sees everything, like a board game waiting to be reset. The next night, someone slips into your room while you sleep and removes your boots. Leaves them by the door. Doesn't touch your dagger. Just your boots. That's not a threat. It's a reminder. You're never alone. Not anymore. And never truly safe. Even from your own side. There's something about sleeping with your boots on that makes you feel like a cornered animal. You don't sleep deeply. You don't dream. You don't even pretend anymore. You just close your eyes and listen to the breathing of the room. Even when you're alone. Especially when you're alone. Because the people who trained you, who chose you, can enter at will. They already have. They left your boots at the door last night like a joke. And when you put them back on, you notice the small hole carved into the sole. Not deep, just enough for a message. Or a sliver of poison. There's nothing inside this. Time, which somehow feels worse. You try to carry on as if things are normal. You return to the baker who never smiles and buy your stale bread. You visit the knife sharpener who hums Gregorian chants while grinding. You nod at the man who sells caged birds and never looks up. But all of them have seen it. Something about you has changed. You've crossed some invisible threshold. You're no longer one of the city's shadows. You're something else. Something more dangerous, and people have started avoiding dangerous things, except for one, the boy. He follows you from time to time. About 12. Lank hair. Wears his father's cloak like armor. You see him in reflections over your shoulder, slipping behind carts. Sometimes he sits outside the apothecary, pretending to sort herbs. One day, you stop. Turn around. Walk straight toward him. He doesn't move. What do you want? You ask. He swallows. To be like you, you laugh. It's the first time in weeks. Not because it's funny. Because it's tragic. You don't want that, you say. He shrugs. Already am. He pulls back his sleeve. Shows a faded brand burned into the skin. A letter. Could be a guild mark. Could be a cruel joke. Hard to tell at that age. You walk away. But slower now. Because if the guild is recruiting children, your time's shorter than you thought. Historians still argue whether young orphans were systematically groomed for roles in underground networks during the medieval era. Some monastic records mention lost boys taken from poorhouses and trained for espionage. Others call such tales myth. Yet artwork from 13th century Florence does depict hooded children holding daggers, although that could just as easily represent allegory, not reality. Still, you've seen enough to suspect the boy's not lying, and you start to wonder, did someone once follow you? Did you once watch someone else in the market, hoping to become what they were? That thought lingers longer than it should. That night, you find a message scratched into the wall of your rented room. Not on parchment. Not with ink. Just a nail and a steady hand. Don't trust the baker. He has your description. You don't go to the bakery the next morning. Instead, you circle the district 3 times and watch the baker's shop from a roof. He smiles more than usual. Talks to 3 people. Passes no bread, but accepts 2 sealed envelopes. You decide not to kill him. Yet. But you burn the solace of your boots anyway. Just in case. You need to disappear again. Reinvent. You shed the name the guild gave you. You stop responding to drop points. Stop reading notes. You cut your hair. Change your accent. Pretend to limp. Wear a pilgrim's badge and mutter prayers when people approach. And just when you think it's working, someone whispers your old name into your ear at the BATHHOUSE. You don't turn around. You just leave, wet, half-shaven, because there are no clean exits in this profession. There's only the illusion of escape. You meet the boy again a week later. His lip is split. His eye is swollen. I messed up, he mumbles. They told me not to follow the priest. I did. You sigh. Pull him into a doorway. Patch him up with a strip of your own shirt. You don't ask questions. He doesn't volunteer. More, but you know what he's feeling. That same heaviness in the gut. The shame that comes not from failure, but from surviving it. Before he leaves, he hands you something. A scrap of parchment. Old. Smudged. Your name at the top. Your description below. And at the bottom, the words. Guild status. Temporary. Not official. Not permanent. Just useful. You're not one of them. You're just on loan. And loans always come due. You dream of a locked door. No key. No handle. Just the sound of knocking from the inside. When you wake, your hands are clenched into fists so tight your nails have drawn blood. You don't remember why. You just know the room smells faintly of smoke, though there's no fire, and the candle you lit before sleeping has melted into a perfect puddle without burning the wick. The guild is sending messages again. This one's subtle, elegant, even, but no less unnerving. You're not free. You're summoned 3 days later by a coin dropped in your bowl of stew. It lands face up, polished unnaturally clean. The crest worn off, but its meaning sharp. A job is waiting. And refusal isn't part of the menu. You meet the contact at the back of a linen stall, where the bolts of fabric hang like funeral shrouds. She's older. Not guild, not obvious. Just another silent middlewoman passing dirty threads along the loom. The bishop, she says softly. He writes letters he shouldn't. Which bishop? She smiles. The one with a taste for dramatics. Of course, Bishop Thalius. A man so theatrical he once held a funeral for a wine cask. Your target. Not for who he is, but for what he knows. Apparently, he's been exchanging correspondence with someone in Aragon, letters full of names, incidents, and a few too many veiled references to the shadows who clean the mistakes of the realm. That last part, that's you. Or someone. Like you. And now someone wants to make sure the good bishop forgets how to write. Permanently. The plan is straightforward. Attend his sermon disguised as a pilgrim. Wait for the congregation to rise in prayer and slip the smallest of knives between two ribs. No scream, no mess. Just one more man of God sent home to meet him. You arrive at the cathedral early. Burn incense. Buy an overpriced relic. Sit in the pew furthest from the sun. But when the bishop enters, something changes. He sees you. Not in a vague, I'm scanning the room way. But in a there you are way. You freeze. He smiles. Slightly. And begins to speak. Not the sermon. He speaks directly to you. The first sin, he says, was not murder. It was hiding, and all sin since has followed its example. You can't move. He walks the aisle, speaks of shadows, of masks, of those who carry blades not for justice, but because they cannot bear to be seen without them. His words are honeyed poison. The congregation listens, rapt. You sweat through your tunic. And then he passes by you, pauses, and drops something into your lap. A folded letter. He never looks back. After the sermon, you leave like a ghost. You don't breathe until you're 3 streets away. Then you open the letter. Inside, a sketch of your face. Crude, but accurate. A name not yours, but the one you used 3 cities ago. And a note. You won't kill me. You need me. He's not wrong. Killing him now would ignite suspicion. Maybe war. Maybe something worse. And the guild? They want results, not fallout. You're left with a decision that assassins aren't supposed to make. Let him live. Or finish the job and accept the consequences. You choose a third option. You forge a letter from the bishop. One so scandalous and absurd it discredits every previous one he sent. You include details no bishop should know, like the secret nickname of a certain barmaid in Toulouse. You deliver it anonymously to 3 powerful clerics and 1 gossip-loving abbot. Within a week, Bishop Thalius is relocated for spiritual reflection. Not dead. Not writing. Mission accomplished. Historians still argue whether church officials were common targets for assassins or simply convenient scapegoats when political plots failed. Some records mention clerical deaths that defy logic, bishops falling out of windows in buildings with no upper floors, or accidentally drowning in basins of holy water. In your case, the target still breathes, but his voice no longer reaches. Rome. The guild leaves you no response, no sign of approval. No coin, just silence, which is somehow worse than rage. You, they become unpredictable, dangerous, not in the way they like. And you know what happens to unpredictable blades? They get melted down. You learn to check for poison in the ink pot now, not because you write letters, but because someone left one open on your windowsill last night, and you haven't owned an ink pot in months. The guild isn't subtle anymore. Your success with Bishop Thalius, if you can even call it that, made you a liability. You were told to kill. You chose to outmaneuver. And worse, it worked. Now they don't know what to do with you. That makes you dangerous. And in your line of work, dangerous is only ever a compliment when it's whispered about someone else. You pack a satchel and leave before sunrise. No note, no trace. You head east, past the vineyards and smoke-wrinkled villages, where your name hasn't reached the tavern walls yet. For 2 days, it's quiet. Too quiet. You find a barn with a straw loft and a sleeping goat that seems indifferent to your presence. You sleep with your back to the wall, dagger against your chest, boots still on. You don't light a fire. You don't dream. But when you wake on the 3rd morning, there's an apple on your chest. Fresh. No bite. Perfectly red. It wasn't there when you fell asleep. You're being toyed with. You eat it anyway. Because starving still worse. At the Trelle. There. Next town, you find an odd little inn run by a man with one eye and a laugh like a kettle about to scream. He gives you a room with no questions. The floor creaks, the bed sags, and the key turns in the lock like it's hiding a secret. You stay one night, then 2, then 5. No messages, no visits, no boots moved. Maybe you're free? You laugh out loud at that. Because no one ever leaves the guild. They just stop being useful. And then they stop being. You take small jobs while you wait for the other boot to drop guard duty. Message runs, even roughing up a merchant who overcharged a widow for sour wine. You start to feel ordinary. You even begin carving again, little wooden figures like the ones your father used to whittle. You give one to the innkeeper's son. It's a dog, sort of. He loves it anyway. You start to forget what it felt like to run. Then one night, you hear it. 3 knocks, then silence. Then one more knock. The guild's rhythm. You sit perfectly still in your bed. Another knock. You rise. Step softly. Draw your blade but hold it behind your leg. You open the door slowly. No one's there. Only a coin on the floor. It's blank. Perfectly round. No face. No crest. You've never seen that before. You close the door. Lock it. Barricade. It. Too late. When you turn, there's someone sitting in your chair. You don't scream. Don't move. Just meet their eyes. She's dressed in black, her face hidden by a silk veil. You recognize her. The woman from the cathedral job. The one who said you were learning restraint. Tell me, she says quietly, have you missed? You say nothing. She leans forward. We have a problem. And you're the only one we trust to handle it. You laugh. Actually laugh. You don't trust me. You say, no, she agrees. But you're unpredictable, and that's suddenly useful again. She places a folded piece of parchment on the table. You don't reach for it. She waits. Calm as winter. Finally, you ask, what happens if I say no? She shrugs. Then I stay here until dawn and make small talk. You reach for the parchment. It's a name. One you know. One you shouldn't know. Because it's your name. The one you were born with. The one no one should have. And beneath it, eliminate subject. High risk of exposure. Historians still argue whether records of early assassins ever included lists of real names, or if those names were burned, erased, buried. But some whispers say the guild kept one copy of each name, a secret ledger stored in a monastery no monk has ever seen. Jest. A theory, probably. But now you're holding a kill order. For yourself, you stare at the woman. She doesn't flinch. I want to know why. You say you became a name. She replies, not a shadow. Names are dangerous. And just like that, you understand. You're not being given a job. You're being given a choice. Erase the name or erase yourself. You sit down, slowly. And start planning. Because if they want you gone, they'll have to send someone better. You burn the parchment. Not because it erases anything, but because it makes you feel like you've done something about it. The flames curl around your name like fingers, hesitant at first, then hungry. You don't look away until the last. Peace turns to ash and drifts onto your boot. The woman doesn't stop you. She just watches. Silent. And then, like nothing happened, she says, the real order's already in motion. That copy was a courtesy. You smile. It doesn't reach your eyes. So I'm flattered? You're dangerous, she says, rising. But not immortal. She leaves the way smoke escapes through cracks, without sound, without air, without proof she was ever there. You sit there for a long time. Not moving, not thinking, just existing. Then, very slowly, you open the floorboard under the bed. You haven't looked inside for weeks, maybe months. You forgot you even had a floorboard stash in this place. But now you do. Inside, a second blade, untouched, a little dull around the edge, but balanced. And next to it a locket. You forgot about the locket. It doesn't open anymore. The clasp's jammed, but you remember what's inside. A scrap of thread from your sister's dress. From before everything. You tuck it into your belt, no longer for memory. For balance. For reminder. Because you're going to do something no assassin ever gets to do. You're going to fight back. It's a ridiculous plan. You know that. No one kills the guild. No one even tries. But maybe that's because no one's ever been invited to their own assassination before. You leave the inn that night, not with stealth, not with fear, but openly. You walk through the market, through the square, past the drunk who mutters to himself, past the statue of some long-dead war hero who probably ordered more poisonings than battles. You head for the archive. Not the royal one, the hidden one, the one buried beneath the Tanner's Guild, where clerks copy letters no one's allowed to read and seal them with wax bearing no insignia. You bribe a clerk, then another. You tell them you're a royal inspector. You forge a seal, badly, but you smile like it's real. Eventually, you find what you're looking for. A list. Not long, just enough names to worry the right people. Yours is there. But so are others. Some you recognize, some you don't. Single quotes. T.1 in particular catches your eye. Thalius, the bishop, still alive. Still writing. Still protected. Enlisted as patron class. You don't sleep that night. You write letters, not for delivery, for leverage. You make copies, burn the originals, leave the copies in 4 locations, one behind a crumbling altar, one beneath a merchant's scales, one tucked into a barmaid's corset she doesn't ask, and one mailed to a city that doesn't exist anymore. Just in case someone still checks the post, you begin to send messages, not to the guild, about the guild, to anyone who might hate them more than they fear them. You start small. A noblewoman whose husband died mysteriously. A sailor who once lost a brother to a ghost with a knife. A monk who collects heresies. Like others collect coins. You don't trust them, but you give them bait. You watch who bites. Within a week, someone slips a coin into your palm at the butcher's. It has your name carved on it. That's new. You're no longer a target. You're bait. And someone else is coming. That night, you hear a sound in the alley behind your room. You step into the darkness, quiet, ready. There's a man waiting, hooded, calm. He doesn't draw, doesn't speak. He just nods. And hands you a second coin. This one is blank, like the one the woman gave you, but colder, heavier. Inside is a message, etched so finely you have to tilt it toward the moonlight to read it. They're watching her too. No name, but you know who her is. The veiled woman, the one who made you, tested you, used you. They're going to kill her. You should feel relief instead. You feel something else. Because if they can erase her, they can erase anyone. And if they can erase everyone, then the story ends with silence. And you're not ready to go quiet yet. You never planned to save anyone, especially not her. But here you are scraping together intelligence like a starving man collecting crumbs because the guild, in its perfect faceless precision, has finally turned on one of its own, and you've decided that if you're going to die, you might as well make it inconvenient for them. First step, find her. You start with rumors, quiet ones, the kind passed between barbers and barmaids, where truths are told in jokes and names are replaced with titles like the Silk Knife or Mistress of the Fog. You hear she was seen near the river docks, then the old chapel, then not seen at all. That last one? That feels closest to the truth. Eventually, you catch a trail. A child delivers a loaf of bread to a blind man. You follow the child, not because the bread matters, but because the wrapping is parchment sealed with a red wax spiral. You've seen that before, on a dagger meant for you. You corner the child gently. Ask where the bread comes from. He says, a lady with soft hands who walks like a ghost. You give him a silver coin. He smiles like you gave him a sword. That night, you wait behind the bakery, half submerged in a barrel of pickled cabbage you regret immediately. She arrives just before dawn, cloaked, slow, cautious. You step out. She doesn't jump. You're not supposed to be here, she says. Neither are you, you reply. She stares. Then finally, you know, they ordered your erasure, you say, wiping cabbage water from your sleeve. I thought I'd return the favor. A long silence. Then she sighs. Not dramatically, tiredly, They move faster than I expected. You tell her about the coin, the hidden message, the new list you found under the Tanner's Guild. She nods. Then they're not just cleaning house, they're building a new one. And there it is, the phrase that confirms what you feared. You're not just a dying breed, you're a prototype being replaced. Historians still argue whether medieval secret societies, like the Guild or various assassin brotherhoods, ever actively updated themselves, replacing older agents with younger, cheaper, more loyal versions. One fringe theory suggests that the famed Venetian informant network of the 14th century was actually a cover for a mass purge of aging spies. Most mainstream historians, however, dismiss this as historical fantasy too cinematic to be true. But you've lived long enough to know the line between fantasy and operation is thinner than parchment. She tells you her plan, and it's a bad one, bold, reckless. Exactly the kind you'd expect from someone who's spent too long surviving and not enough time living. She wants to expose them. All of them. The names, the methods, the ledger. Burn the myth. Let the world see what hides under the veil. You ask, why not just run? She looks away. Because I did once. You don't ask what happened next. Instead, you say, all right, let's steal the truth. The plan begins with fire. Not literal, not yet, but the kind that sparks when secrets collide. You leak part of the guild's ledger to a monastery scribe with a drinking problem and a big mouth. By the next market day, a bishop's name is on every gossip's tongue. Then, you intercept a guild drop point, replace the message with something false. It sends 3 agents into the wrong city chasing the wrong man. They kill a merchant. Son by accident. Word spreads. Reputations shake. And slowly, the fear shifts. They used to be the ones who watched. Now, they're the ones being watched. But it's not enough. You need the ledger. The one she says exists. The one no one has ever seen. The book that keeps all the names. According to her, it's hidden beneath an old observatory, abandoned after the last plague. Protected by traps and oaths and a librarian who doesn't age. You laugh. That part's real? She just nods. He files memories. You gather gear. Not weapons tools, rope, ink, oil, chalk, a black mirror. For reasons you don't fully understand. The observatory is 6 stories of rotting beams and secrets. You move through it like a dream. Carefully, slowly. The stairs creak. The floor groans. You find a hallway made of broken star maps and a room where time seems to breathe. Then, the librarian. He's sitting behind a desk, blindfolded, skin like paper. Not dead. Not quite alive. He doesn't speak, but he gestures toward the door. With 7 locks, you place your name on the desk. He touches it. 1 lock clicks open. You place the coin. Another. Click. Then the locket. The 3rd lock. He waits. You look at the woman beside you. She nods, then places her glove. 4th. You pause. What if we don't have enough? He finally speaks. You've already given everything. And with that, the last lock's open. Inside the room is no treasure. Just a single shelf. 1 book. You lift it. Heavy. Breathing. Warm. The ledger. Not ink. Not parchment. Skin. Yours is the first name that glows. The woman touches her. Own. It vanishes. You stare at the book. You could burn it. You could read it. You could erase yourself completely. But you don't. You turn. And carry it into the night. Because the truth is better used as leverage. You walk out of the observatory with the ledger wrapped in wool and silence. It's heavier than it should be. Not in mass, though it's solid, but in presence. Like it knows it's not supposed to be carried. Like every step you take with. It echoes through walls you'll never see. The woman walks beside you, steady as ever. Not speaking, just watching. As if she expects the book to bite. You don't go far. Just beyond the city walls, into the ruins of an old way station overgrown with ivy and superstition. It's the kind of place travelers avoid, not because of ghosts, but because it feels like ghosts might avoid it too. You sit on opposite ends of a broken fountain and unwrap the ledger. It doesn't scream. That's a good start. You flip it open. The pages are strange, not quite parchment, not quite flesh. They shimmer under moonlight, shifting like reflections in oil. And the names, oh, the names, written in ink that hasn't dried in years. Some in languages long dead. Some in symbols, some just etched. Yours is there, of course. So is hers. So is Bishop Thallius. So is 18. So is the boy. That stops you. You stare at it. The scribbled nickname the boy gave himself, scrawled in the margins like a child trying to prove he mattered. And then, a second mark, line through, inactive. You show her. She frowns. They erased him, she murmurs. Not killed, just cut off. No guidance, you ask. No protection, she replies. They've left him to be hunted by others, or become a hunter himself. You close the book. Your fingers are shaking. Because suddenly, it's not about you anymore. It's not even about revenge. It's about what comes next. Historians still argue whether there was ever a single centralized guild that tracked the lives and deaths of its agents, or if this myth emerged from a patchwork of smaller local cabals. Some claim the Black Ledger of Ghent was a metaphor and allegorical book of sin. Others insist it was real, its pages made from tanned skin of traitors and bound by a blind archivist who never spoke. You now know at least part of that is true. You bury the ledger that night, not deeply, just enough to hide it from passing eyes. You mark the tree beside it with a symbol you invent on the spot. Something that looks like a flame held in a closed fist. She doesn't question it. You both walk away before dawn. 3 days later, a name appears on a wall in the city center, painted in red. A real name, one that once lived in the ledger. A noble who ordered a string of murders disguised as plague deaths. He's arrested before nightfall, quietly, politely. The world never hears the full story, but you do, because you started it, and the guild knows it. You move again. New city, new name, new rhythm. But now, the silence feels different. Not the old silence, the hunted silence. The kind that presses against your ribs and waits for your breath to fail. No, this silence has space in it. Room to think, room to plan. You begin writing, not letters, not threats. Histories. Of the ones who didn't survive long enough to leave their mark. The squire in the fosse, Bathous, the drunk, who WSN single quotes to. The boy with the branded wrist. You write them carefully, not with names, just truth. You hide the pages in places the guild won't look, beneath the floorboards of libraries, behind loose stones in chapels, inside the hollow limbs of wooden saints. You're building something now. Not resistance, not rebellion. Memory. One night, you wake to find the veiled woman standing by your window. She doesn't speak, just holds out a ring. Etienne's. You take it. She nods once, then turns to go, but you stop her. Why help me now? She doesn't look back, because the story's bigger than us. And then she's gone again. You're left holding a symbol of the first job you ever refused. The ring is cold, heavy. You slip it into your pocket. The guild is still out there. Watching, adjusting, replacing. But now, so are you. And every time they erase a name, you write one down. You start keeping track of your heartbeat again. Not because you're afraid, though you probably should be, but because it reminds you you're still here, still breathing. Still you. Most assassins stop doing that. The guild makes sure of it. Strip away the self, and what's left is obedience. But the moment you begin counting your own pulse again, you've already broken the mold. You begin each day by sharpening your knife, not for use, but for ritual. A reminder. You make your bed. Boil water. Practice writing your name, not their fake ones, not the guild-given aliases, but your name. The one the ledger nearly buried. And always, always, you listen. Because whispers are your new currency. You trade in them now. The innkeeper says, a man came through asking about a limping cloth merchant. That's you this month. You pay him with a charm made of copper wire and a fishbone. It's useless. He treasures it anyway. You meet a sailor who once ferried a body downstream in a sealed crate. He swears it twitched. You buy him a drink and tell him it probably did. The guild like to test poisons that wear off just after burial. He laughs. You done single quotes. Then one morning, tucked under your door, you find a sliver of parchment folded into the shape of a heron. The heron is the Guild symbol for amends. Which is usually a lie. You open it anyway. It reads, "You are invited. One last time. Refuse, and we'll write the ending for you." There's a time, a place, a seal. It's not a command. It's bait. And you're already walking toward the hook. You know this is a trap. It doesn't matter. Sometimes, you enter the lion's den not because you're brave, but because you've grown tired of walking in circles around it. The meeting is in a bathhouse, not the same one where you made your first kill, but similar. Steam-filled, marble. Floors, quiet laughter echoing off tile. They're always fond of full circles. You're escorted to a private chamber. 2 guards. No words. Inside. 3 people seated behind a low table. You recognize none of them. And all of them. The guild is like that. They don't introduce themselves. They simply begin. "You've been disruptive," says the one in the middle, whose hands are clean but whose nails are blackened. "You've jeopardized balance." You shrug. "Balance is subjective." "No," says the woman to the left. "Balance is the only truth." You remain standing. You've seen the ledger. The third says, older, quieter. "We didn't expect that." You smile. "Maybe you should start expecting more." That draws silence. They don't threaten you. That would be beneath them. Instead, they offer something worse. A choice. Return to the fold. The middle one says, "We wipe your record. Start again. New city. New life." No memory. You almost laugh. No me. They nod. You pause. You do the thing you didn't think you'd do. You ask, "Why not just kill me?" The answer comes quickly, because everyone's watching now. And there it is. You've become a problem not just for them, but for the idea of them. A crack in the myth. A smudge on the mask. And the guild doesn't kill symbols. It replaces them. Unless the symbol decides to rewrite itself. You leave the bathhouse. UNESCORTED. They let you go. Which means they're still betting you'll come around. You don single quotes T. Instead, you go back to the ledger. Dig it up. Open to a random page. And find a name you don't expect. The boy. It's no longer marked inactive. It's marked pending. And below it, a single instruction. Ascend. You close the book with shaking hands. He's not just alive. He's being promoted. You stare out into the trees and feel the pulse of something ancient, rhythmic, larger than you. The guild isn't a person. It's a storm, a tide, a self-correcting machine. You trained under it, betrayed it, escaped it. But now the question is bigger than you. What happens when the next generation walks in and never realizes they're inside? A cage? You sit by the fire that night and write something new, not a name. A warning. You were not born a blade. And you leave it tucked inside a hollow brick in a city wall where a boy might one. They hide because someone left you breadcrumbs once. And you're finally ready to leave a trail of your own. You spend the next few weeks becoming invisible, not in the guild's way. Not like a shadow slipping behind a target, but in a way that feels more honest. You stop wearing weapons. You stop using aliases. You walk like someone who has nowhere to be. You let people forget you. And they do. It's shockingly easy. You rent a room above a potter's workshop in a town with no name on the royal map. You take up carving again, this time with purpose. Small animals, faces you half remember. One figure you carve over and over is a child holding a stick like a sword. You never keep them. You give them away. You begin to understand something important. It's not the kills that ruin you. It's the waiting between them. The moments where your hands are empty, but your mind is still carrying bodies. That's where the ghosts settle in. But the peace doesn't last. Of course, it DOESN single quotes T. It never does. One night, you return from gathering wood to find your door ajar. Inside, everything is untouched, except your window. Someone has drawn a symbol on the glass with condensation from their breath. A Huron. Again. You sit on the bed and wait for the knock. It comes 4 hours later. It's the boy, older now, taller, wearing a cloak he didn't earn. Eyes full of something heavy. "I need to talk," he says. You open the door. He doesn't sit. Just paces, shifts. Breathes too loudly. "I think they want me to kill you." He blurts. You nod. Of course they do, but they didn't say it, he adds. They gave me a name, a location, a time, but not a face. You finish the sentence for him. And somehow, it's me. He doesn't confirm it. He doesn't need to. You study him. The way his hands twitch when idle. The way he scans corners without thinking. He's almost exactly who they wanted you to be once, and still, part of you sees yourself in him. What do you want to do? You ask. He looks down. I don't know. I wanted answers. About how to leave. You don't lie. You tell him the truth. You don't. Not really. You just keep walking away until your footsteps get quieter. He looks up. Will they stop chasing me? You shake your head. No. But one day, they'll send someone younger. Someone like you. And when that happens, you'll have to choose. He stays the night. You give him your bed. You sleep on the floor. In the morning, he's gone. But he's left something on the table. A wooden carving. One of yours, the child. With the stick sword, he's added a second figure beside it. Smaller, holding a candle. That day, you retrieve the ledger from its hiding place. It's heavier than before. You open it, heart already braced for what you'll see. Your name glows. Faintly, but next to it now is a single new word. Observed. They've stopped actively hunting you. Now they're watching, which might be worse. Historians still argue whether any members of medieval assassination guilds ever truly retired. One obscure chronicle speaks of a shadow who grew tired, who lived for 9 years in a mountain village and taught children how to balance stones. Another mentions a one-eyed baker who never raised his voice and once slit a thief's throat with a butter knife before returning to kneading dough. But there are no names, no graves, only whispers, and that, perhaps, is the quietest legacy of your kind. You spend that winter documenting everything. The codes, the rituals, the symbols, the burns, the lies. You write it plainly. No drama, no poetry, just truth. And at the bottom of every page, you add the same closing line. No one was born for this. You wrap the pages in oilcloth and hide them in separate places, under a stone in a graveyard, inside the wall of a burned stable, in the hollow of a tree that's been struck by lightning. You don't need people to read them. Now, you need them to survive, because someone will find them. Someday. Maybe the boy. Maybe someone like him. Maybe someone better. And when they do, they'll know one thing you never got to hear. They are not alone. The thaw comes late this year. You count the days by the sound of dripping roofs and the return of crows. The kind that don't fear people. The kind that stare, unblinking, as if trying to remember your face. You're still in the village with no name, still carving, still breathing. But something's shifted. The guild hasn't moved in months, not that you can tell. No messages, no symbols, no tokens in your bowl of soup. It's the longest silence you've ever known. And it doesn't feel like mercy. It feels like assessment. They're watching, yes, but for what? Weakness? Loyalty? An end? You consider moving again, but the idea exhausts you. You've done enough. Running. And frankly, you're tired of pretending the ground doesn't belong to you just because someone might be looking. Instead, you start visiting the chapel ruins again. At first, just to sit. Then, to listen. The stones creak when they cool. The wind hums through broken archways. Once, you hear a voice that sounds like your own whispering your name, but it's probably just memory folding in on itself. You find another carving tucked into a crack in the altar. One morning. Not yours. It's a replica of the child with the stick sword, and next to it, another. A Huron, carved badly. Shaky lines, hesitant hand. You smile. A little. He's still out there. The boy. Leaving breadcrumbs now. You wonder if he's being hunted. Or if he's begun hunting them. Either way, he's writing his story in wood now, not blood. That's a kind of progress. Historians still debate whether assassins left behind records of their lives, or if all documentation was constructed by their enemies after death. The Obscura Vita, a 15th century compilation of anonymous biographies, contains several first-person accounts that may or may not have come from killers who chose to fade rather than burn. Some scholars insist they're fables. Others argue the truth is always quieter than fiction. You begin to write again. This time, you address it directly. To the one who replaces me. You don't sign it. You don't say don't kill. You say ask why. You're being asked to. You say you have more choices than they tell you. You say they trained your hand, not your soul. You hide the note in a loose stone in the chapel floor. Under the third step, the one that always groans like a tired priest. Someone will find it. Someday. You no longer measure survival by how long you live, but by how long your words last. One day, a traveler comes through. A real one. Not guild. Just someone hungry and cold. You offer him food. He offers stories. He speaks of a city where assassins killed a prince, but left a letter behind explaining why. He speaks of a monk who tried to expose the guild and vanished. Yes, but whose sermons now carry secret names. Embedded in the Psalms. He speaks of a woman with a veil who disappeared after a failed mission in the East, only to reappear 10 years later with a daughter and no shadow behind her. You don't comment, but you listen, because those sound like your echoes. The things you set in motion without meaning to. The things you planted that finally grew. That night, you sit by your fire and open the ledger. One last time. Your name still glows. But now there's a line beneath it. Just one word. Dormant. Not erased. Not observed. Just resting. Like a weapon in a drawer. Like a story waiting for a reader. You close the book. Wrap it carefully. Return it to its place beneath the roots of the gnarled tree beyond the chapel wall. And then you sit beside it. Not to guard it. Not to hide it. But because you're no longer afraid of what it holds. You whisper, I'm not a weapon anymore. And the wind, perhaps, whispers back, then what are you? And you answer softly, still deciding. You wake before the sun. Not from fear, not from habit, just stillness. There's a weight to the air, like the world's holding its breath. You feel it in the stone beneath your feet, in the brittle sound of the frost cracking across the window pane. A silence not of danger, but of decisions approaching. You step outside. The sky's painted in dull silver, clouds hanging low, ready to fall but undecided about what. At the edge of the field, you see him. The boy. No longer a boy, really. Taller now, broader, his hair tied back, his eyes harder. But it's him. He waits. Until you notice him. Doesn't wave, doesn't approach. Just waits. You nod once. He walks toward you. When he reaches you, he doesn't say hello. He just pulls something from his cloak and holds it out. It's a page, torn from a book. You don't need to ask where it's from. It's the ledger, and the name written on it shaky, urgent, fresh ink is hers. The veiled woman. Next to it. Erase, all branches connected, order confirmed. He looks at you, jaw tight. I took it before they could send it out, he says. They'll know it's missing. They'll guess it was me. You don't ask why he brought it to you. You already know, because he's been following your trail, your carvings, your warnings, your silences. He doesn't want to be them, but he doesn't know how not to be. You sit beside the fire. He doesn't at first. Then slowly he lowers himself to the ground. He places the torn page into the flames without a word. You both watch it curl and blacken. The ink bubbles. The name disappears. She saved me, he finally says. You nod. She saved me too. You reply. You tell him everything. Not all at once, but in pieces, like how stories should be told. Over tea, over carved wood, over long walks to nowhere in particular. You teach him how to listen. Not just for footsteps, but for intention. For breath patterns. For hesitation. For mercy. He teaches you, too, how to see the world again without cataloging weaknesses. How to sit in silence that doesn't come with a knife at the end of it. One night, he asks what the guild really wants. You say, obedience. Then you say, legacy. Then, finally, control. He nods. Then says, they can have none of those from me. That's when you know he's ready. Not to kill, but to remember. You give him the ledger. Not forever, just to carry. To understand its weight. To know that memory is heavier than any blade, and sometimes far sharper. He opens it only once. Just enough to see a single name. His own dot, it doesn't glow. It doesn't burn. It just waits. You don't know what that means yet, but you suspect. He'll decide. Historians still argue whether knowledge passed down from assassins was ever meant to preserve peace, or if it simply sharpened new blades. There are fragments of writings, scratched into stone, hidden in margins of forgotten books, that suggest some killers wanted more than survival, that they wanted understanding, that they wanted someone to choose differently. You and the boy travel together for a while. You use fake names, not for safety, for play. You tell people you're map makers or librarians. Once, he tells a child you're a traveling cloud measurer. The child believes you. You stop in towns where no one asks questions, where stories still matter, where bread is shared without price. And every so often, you leave something behind. Not a death, not a threat, a story carved into a bench, painted on a wall, pressed into a book margin, buried in a bottle. About a name that refused to vanish. About a boy who refused to become what they trained him to be. About a woman who could have disappeared, but instead turned back. The guild is still out there. You feel them. Watching. Waiting. But you're not hiding anymore, because you've already done the hardest thing an assassin can do. You've lived long enough to regret it, and longer still to change. Spring arrives with mud. It seeps into your boots, cakes your knees, clings to the hem of your cloak like a stubborn memory. But you don't mind. After winters spent dodging blades and walking through fog, there's something honest about soil that won't let go. You and the boy, who still hasn't told you his real name, travel east. Not toward anything. Just away. You're not running, just making space. In one town, you find a broken printing press and spend 2 days fixing it, just for the joy of hearing it work. In another, you help mend a bridge washed out by last year's rain, and no one asks why your hands are so scarred. You begin to forget the rhythm of fear, but it doesn't forget you, because one morning, outside a tiny village that smells like moss and sheep, the boy returns from fetching water with a strange look. "They found us," he says. He's not panicked. He's resigned. He holds out a satchel. Inside, a coin. Blank. And warm. They've marked you both, not for death. Not yet. Just for watching. And in a way, that's worse. You sit by the river that night. The stars blurry in the current. He asks, "Do we keep running?" You shake your head. "No, we let them watch." He blinks. "Why?" "Because sometimes the best way to break a pattern," you say, "is to make it boring." He laughs. And you do too. Because it's true. They want tension. A chase. A climax. They don't know what to do with stillness. So you give it to them. You stay in that village for 6 months. You teach the boy how to build shutters that don't creak. He teaches you a song he half remembers from a town you've never heard of. You carve figures together, farmers, merchants, animals that never existed, and the villagers come to know you, not as killers, not even as travelers. Just as the quiet pair who help with winter prep and repair broken cartwheels. You become harmless, or at least you make it look that way. But the work never truly stops. Every now and then, you leave messages in code carved under window ledges. You intercept guild runners and change their routes. You publish anonymous fables in traveling chapbooks that teach the reader how to fake their death, using swamp lily and sheep's blood. Subtle things. Disruptions. Annoyances. Historians still debate whether any assassin ever truly dismantled part of their own system, or if those stories were written later to romanticize quiet deaths. One disputed parchment from southern France describes a gray man and a quiet son who traveled from village to village, helping people disappear, not to kill, but to uncapture. Many scholars dismiss it as folklore. Others say it's all that's left when records burn and silence wins. One day, a stranger arrives in the village. Tall, unarmed, friendly. He sells ribbons and honey. You know his type. Too observant, too polite, too still. He sets up in the square, chatting easily with children, giving out sweets. He doesn't ask about you. He waits. And that's how you know he's real. Not a blade. A mirror. Sent to see what you'll do. The boy asks if you'll handle it. You say no. You bake bread, 3 loaves. 1 goes to the neighbor. 1 you eat together. The third you bring to the man. You sit beside him. He accepts it, smiles. You say, "Tell them we're doing fine." He replies, "They already know." You leave. He leaves. That's the game now. Not blood. Balance. And balance, you've learned, isn't about standing still. It's about moving without falling. So you keep moving, quietly, not to escape, but to plant. Because one day, someone will ask, why didn't they kill them? And the answer will be, because they couldn't. Not without making martyrs. Not without proving the system can be broken. And no guild, no matter how old, how precise, can risk that. You've become their weakness. A story they don't know how to end. So they let you drift. And you do. Like a leaf they can't quite catch. Like a name they can't quite erase. Like a life that finally quietly belongs to you. You stop carrying a weapon. Not as an act of peace. As a dare. For months now, you've moved freely. No contracts. No messages. No shadows except your own. The guild hasn't approached. No new Huron. No blank coins. Just stillness drawn out. Deliberate. Like the pause between lightning and thunder. You know what that means. They're recalculating. Not deciding if they'll act, but how. You're no longer a liability to be eliminated. You're an anomaly. A former weapon walking loose. In the open. Too visible to erase. Too quiet to inspire fear. So they watch. They wait, and you let them. Because somewhere along the way, you realized something else. You are no longer alone. It's not just the boy. There are others now. A woman in red who trades silk and sleeps with a dagger under her pillow but hasn't used it in years. A butcher in a southern city who used to clean up after jobs and now teaches kids to gut fish. Even the one-eyed baker who bakes his loaves with codes carved into the crust. You've crossed paths with all of them. Some speak, some nod. None wear the guild's face anymore. They wear their own. You begin keeping track. Not names, never names. Just signs. A ribbon tied to the wrong wrist. A candle set upside down. A coin with a scratch through the eye. You leave your own, too. A pinnacone carved to resemble a mask. A phrase etched into a gate latch. The flame doesn't forget. One day, the boy, no longer a boy, truly asks, what happens if they come again? You answer, then we write it down. Not fight. Write. Because stories last longer than knaves. And if they come to kill you, they'll only fuel the myth. And the myth is more dangerous than any assassin alive. Historians still argue whether any resistance movement truly formed within the ranks of medieval killer guilds. Most records say no. But in the margins of an old herb ledger, one curious phrase appears multiple times. The Ember Guild. No one knows what it means. Some say it referred to a rebellion. Others claim it was a metaphor for surviving members who went dark, who burned low and quiet. Never quite extinguished. You think you know. It wasn't a rebellion. It was a reminder that even the coldest system can carry a spark. And now that spark is spreading. You visit a city where a prince once died under suspicious circumstances. His sister now rules. She's young, calm, eyes like razors. You expect fear. But when she meets your gaze, she nods once. Respect. Not deference. She knows who you were. And chooses not to flinch. Progress. The guild still exists. Of course it does. But it's quieter. Now. Less efficient. Their jobs take longer. Their replacements hesitate. Some defect. Some disappear. Some come to find you. Not for contracts. For guidance. They ask how you did it. How you left. You tell them the truth. You didn't. You just kept walking until their path no longer followed. And then you made a new one. One night, a child knocks on your door. She says she found something buried near the chapel. You follow her through the woods. She leads you to a tree stump. Inside, the ledger. You didn't hide it here. Someone else did. You open it. Pages are missing. Some names faded, but one still glows. Yours. And next to it, witness. You close it. Slowly, you look at the girl. Did you read it? She nods. It told me you weren't scary. You smile, because that might be the first time anyone said that in your presence. And you realize something else. The guild never understood why you mattered. They thought you were dangerous because you disobeyed. But really, you endured. And there's no system built to handle that. So you let the girl keep the ledger. Tell her it's just a storybook. For now. She asks if it's true. You say, that depends on who writes the next chapter. She grins and runs off. Pages clutched in her arms. You stand in the clearing, alone again, but only for a moment. Then you begin walking. Not away, not toward. Just forward. Because your story isn't done. And neither is the myth. You begin dreaming again. Not of blades, not of blood, just doors, always slightly ajar, always leading somewhere warmer. You don't wake sweating anymore. You wake curious. It's the strangest part of survival, how easily you begin to crave a future after living so long on borrowed time. You start making plans, small ones. Fix the roof, plant more time, teach someone how to sharpen a blade without slicing their thumb open. You let yourself be known, not just recognized. People wave to you now. Some even ask your opinion on matters that have nothing to do with death. It feels dangerous. It feels like healing. And of course, that's when the guild returns. Not with poison. Not with messengers or coins or codes scratched into your wall. They send a child. You know better by now than to underestimate that. She arrives during the spring market, barefoot, with wild hair and the kind of stillness in her eyes that only comes from training or trauma. She finds you without effort, sits beside you on a low stone wall, doesn't speak for 5 minutes. Then, they sent me to learn from you. You raise an eyebrow. So they want me to train my replacement? She shrugs. They said you were the only one who survived long enough to regret it. You should laugh. You done single quotes T. Instead, you study her. She's too thin. Fingernails bitten. Calluses where a dagger hilt would sit. And in her bag, a coin so worn it's turned smooth. She's been carrying it like a name. You ask, do you want to learn from me? She doesn't answer. Just reaches into her pocket and hands you something. A carving of a bird. A heron. Yes, but its wings are broken. Deliberately, gently. And you realize she's already started. Choosing. Not the guild's path. Hers. You accept her presence with quiet caution. Not as a student. Not yet. As a watcher. Like you once were. She follows you for weeks. Helps carry water. Listens more than she speaks. Sometimes she hums a song you don't recognize. Sometimes she cries in her sleep. You don't ask what they did to her. You already know. Instead, you teach her how to be still. Not hidden. Still. The kind of quiet that commands space. You show her how to gather herbs that can heal or harm, depending on who's holding them. You teach her how to read people, not just patrols. One day, you hand her a blade. She refuses it. I'm not ready. You nod. Good, because it was a test, and she passed. Historians still debate whether any assassin ever trained someone to not become an assassin. The romanticized image is always of the master passing down deadly knowledge like a torch. But in rare oral records, passed from village to village, there are whispers of those who taught silence, empathy, patience, who trained others not to strike first, but to recognize when striking wasn't necessary at all. You take her to the chapel. The one where you hid your first letter to the next generation. She finds it before you point it out. She reads it, folds it, doesn't cry. But later that night, she places the note under her pillow, like a talisman. You see her begin to change. Not fast, not dramatically, but steadily. She hums less, cries less, sleeps more. You teach her carving. She's terrible at first, then slightly less terrible. You never ask her real name. She never asks yours. It's a kind of unspoken pact. The only names that matter now are the ones you choose for yourselves. You call her Ember. She calls you Wick. Not because you burn, but because you used to. One day, she asks, do you think they'll ever stop watching us? You pause. Then answer, no, but eventually they'll stop understanding what they see. Because what you're building here, it doesn't fit in their worldview. It isn't obedience. It isn't defiance. It's unwritten. And that's more terrifying to them than a 1,000 blades. It starts raining during the wheat harvest, not a light drizzle, but a cold, relentless curtain that flattens the stalks and fills the ditches in a matter of hours. You and Ember help the villagers cover what they can with tarpaulins, stacking grain sacks in the old grain hall where mice long ago claimed dominion. You don't mind the labor. You never did. Honest work dulls the nerves, leaves less room for ghosts. But that night, after the rain stops, the ghosts return. Only this time, they knock literally 3 sharp raps on the wood of your door. It's late. No one knocks this late unless something's wrong. Ember rises silently. Beside you, no fear, just stillness. She's learned well. You open the door. No person, just an object, centered on the doorstep. A mask. Thin, carved from wood. Painted white. Expressionless. The guild's calling card. When they want to remind you that you're not forgotten. You stare at it for a long time. Then calmly, you pick it up, turn it over, etched into the back with a hot blade. Rewrite this. You sigh. Are they challenging us? Ember asks. No, you say, closing the door. They're giving us permission. She frowns. Permission for what? To become the thing they're afraid of. You place the mask on the mantle, not out of pride, but defiance. Let it sit there like a bad omen left unfulfilled, because here's the truth the guild never accounted for. When you live long enough outside the system, you stop fearing it. And when others begin to see that, the myth begins to rot. You and Ember start sending letters. Not threats. Not blackmail. Stories. Disguised as fables. Slipped into children's books. Scribed in the margins of market ledgers. Each one a truth wrapped in fiction. A tale of a girl who fled a house of mirrors and learned to break reflections. A tale of a man who lost his shadow and never wanted it back. A tale of a guild that taught silence and was undone by those who learned to whisper back. Some are intercepted. You're sure of it, but enough get through. One even returns, rewritten, recopied, and posted on the walls of a distant village as a play. You hear about it from a peddler who doesn't recognize you. He tells the tale with wide eyes, of a masked killer who plants flowers instead of bodies. Ember listens, stone-faced, but later, she smiles in her sleep. Historians still argue whether early rebel writings were coordinated or coincidental. A handful of texts from the 14th and 15th centuries allude to the quiet ones, who left behind tools of the trade and instead built gardens from their scars. Some believe these stories were metaphors for religious penitence. Others say it was the birth of something new, an ideology, not a faction. You don't care what they call it. You just know it's working, because one evening, a courier delivers a sealed envelope addressed to the Broken Flame. Inside, a list, names, locations, rolls. In one line in red ink. I'm done. Burn this after reading. No signature, but you recognize the handwriting. It's the woman. The veiled one. She's vanished, gone from every whisper, every ledger, every network. The guild didn't erase her. She erased herself. You burn the letter, not because she asked, because you understand. Disappearance, when chosen, is not a death. It's freedom. You think about following her. Just walking off, vanishing. But then Ember hands you another carving. It's the mask, split in two. Inside, she's etched 2 tiny figures, one kneeling with an open book, the other holding a pen like a dagger. You said to rewrite it, she says. So I started. You look out the window. The fields are soaked. The village is quiet. Somewhere, a fox howls. And for the first time in years, you feel not alone. Not hunted. Alive. The guild still exists. But so do you. And your version of the story is gaining readers. You bury the mask, not in fear, not in ceremony, just with the same quiet conviction as planting a seed under the old pine behind the chapel. Ember helps you dig, wordless. When it's done, you press the soil flat with your palm, leaving no marker. If they ever come looking, she says, they'll find nothing. Exactly, you reply, because that mask isn't a warning anymore. It's a relic, a closed chapter. And you've decided something neither of you says aloud. You're not going back. That evening, the village celebrates the first dry week of spring with music and cider and far too much stew. You and Ember sit at the edge of the firelight watching, Dancers trip over their own joy. She carves lazily. You mend someone's torn satchel. No one bothers you. A few people even thank you. The next day, a traveler passes through scarred, quiet, wearing boots too fine for a farmer. You recognize the walk. He lingers near the smithy. You see him eye the candle marks carved under the window frame. You intercept him before he can leave. You say, "There's nothing here for you." He looks at you, doesn't deny anything. Then, he pulls out a folded parchment and hands it to you. Not a hit, not a list. A cull, question, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. If the guild were to fall, what would replace it? You look up. The man is already walking away. You don't follow. Instead, you open the page fully. There's a second line, and who decides? You carry that question for days. Let it weigh your steps. You want to dismiss it. But you can't, because it's the one thing you've never really planned for. You've fought the guild, survived. It subverted it, but replacing it? That's something else. Ember finds you by the river, legs in the water, eyes locked on the current. She says nothing, just sits beside you. After a long silence, you ask her, if the guild disappeared tomorrow, would you want something in its place? She shrugs. People still disappear. People still hurt each other. You nod. So someone would fill the gap. But maybe it doesn't have to be a guild, she says. Maybe it's just people. Like us. You look at her and suddenly, you don't see the frightened child they sent to your door. You see a voice, a beginning. Historians still argue whether post-guild movements ever took shape. Some point to documents from a short-lived group called the Candled, who offered safe passage, witness protection, and something like a moral code. Others claim it was myth of bedtime, story for those afraid the world would remain sharp forever. You decide not to care what they'll say, because one night, Ember brings you a map hand-drawn, messy marked with towns, rivers, names. None are real. Not yet. But beside each, she's carved a candle. Some lit, some unlit. I think we start small, she says, and you realize she's not asking. She's starting. So you help. You write letters. Not as warnings, as invitations. To the butcher who still hums old codes. To the silk trader who left a veil behind. To the child who carries a name no one gave them. You ask them not to fight. You ask them to watch. To protect. To bear witness when others go missing. And remember the ones who don't come back. You don't build a guild. You build a ledger with no names. Just moments. Saved lives. Averted deaths. Tiny resistances. You leave messages in open light, not darkness. And some nights, the candles in Ember's map begin to glow, one by one, lit by strangers who choose not to obey. You never meant to lead anything, but you've become something the guild never accounted for. A myth that grows not in shadow but in flame, and flame spreads. The first time you hear someone say your name again, your real name, it's from a child. Not Ember, not a guild whisperer. Just a child playing with a carved figure you made, turning it in her hand and asking her mother, did Wick really live? Here, the mother hushes her, but not angrily. And your breath catches, because she said it like a story, not a threat. Not a warning, a tale. You watch from a distance. You don't interrupt. You let the moment live on its own. That night, Ember draws a symbol on the map you haven't seen before. A candle with a wick shaped like an eye. What's that? You ask. She grins. That's when they start saying your name like a legend. You roll your eyes, but you don't argue, because the next morning, a letter arrives in the satchel of a passing merchant. No name. Just this. One candle lit the street during the storm. We followed it home. The letters keep coming, each one short. Poetic. Vague. Each one from someone who used to be like you, and each ends the same way. A candle drawn beside a name, not a kill list. A witness list. You and Ember build a second ledger, not of names to erase but of names to remember. The people you saved without realizing it. The ones who found your trail and followed it to safety. The ones who didn't become shadows. And that ledger? It becomes heavier than the old one ever was, because it holds hope. And hope, as it turns out, has mass. Historians still argue whether a second ledger ever existed. a reverse guild. As one cynical scribe described it, a foolish attempt to track good deeds in a profession built on silence. But in a monastery tucked into the cliffs of Iberia, there exists a weathered book bound in plain hide, its pages filled with strange illustrations, candles beside names. Never extinguished. Some believe it's a monk's hallucination. Others believe it's the ledger of the unforgotten. You know better, because you wrote half of it. And Ember is writing the rest. The guild has gone quiet. Not gone just quiet. No new coins. No new orders. Not because they've surrendered. Because they're waiting. To see if the silence you've created will collapse on itself. But you've discovered something deeper. Silence is only dangerous when it hides something. When it carries memory. It becomes sacred. You and Ember start teaching openly now. Not as killers. As keepers. You speak to midwives about poisons, not how to use them, but how to spot them. You speak to children about stories, not how to strike, but how to stay. People listen. Not because you're loud. But because you've stayed alive. And survival, in your case, has become a kind of sermon. One day, you find a letter addressed to the one who didn't regret it fast enough. Inside, a single page, blank. You understand immediately. It's the guild's way of saying they won't pursue you anymore, because even they know a fire can only be smothered, not reasoned with. And you've learned to burn slowly. So you frame that blank page. Place it beside your carving knives. A trophy. Proof that even the quietest resistance can earn a truce. Not a pardon. Not forgiveness. Just acknowledgement. That night, Ember asks you, if they offered you your old life again, same skills, same promise, same clean ledger, would you take it? You don't think long. No. She nods. Me neither. You sip tea in silence. You both watch the wind dance through the candlelight. And you realize you've become what the guild never could. Story with no ending yet. The weather turns cold again. You feel it in your joints before it hits the rooftops. Ember complains about the wind in the mornings, tugging her hair in 6 directions at once. You tell her it builds character. She tells you that's what old people say when they can't find better excuses. You like that she teases you now. It means she's healing. The villagers are preparing for winter early this year. You help patch roofs, oil hinges, wrap pipes with straw and string. You don't wear gloves. You want to feel the cold. To remind yourself that discomfort is still survivable. Then, one day, a stranger arrives with a broken arm and a note tucked into her boot. Not a guild agent. Defector. She doesn't say much, just that she followed the carvings, the notes, the fables, the whispers. She found you by accident. But really, not by accident at all. Ember helps bind her arm. You sit beside her and listen. The woman Kia, she says, was a tracker. Taught to find anyone, anywhere. Until she began finding herself, and stopped liking what she saw. She says the last message she received was an instruction to correct the candle. She doesn't know what that means, but you do. It means you, the guild, hasn't forgotten. They're just letting the leash out. Seeing how far you'll run before the cliff. You look at Ember. She nods. You look at Kia. She's already staying. You begin expanding your maps. Your circles of contact, your ledger of the unforgotten. You send Kia east, not as a scout, not as big butt, as a route. She's to settle, plant, listen. If she's ever followed, she know what to do. And just like that, your myth branches again. Historians still argue whether the so-called kindling network truly existed. Some claim it was a myth spawned from guild paranoia. Others swear they encountered former assassins who offered sanctuary instead of steel. A merchant in the Bohemian Hills once spoke of a woman with a shattered arm who paid for apples with carved coins that told stories if you held them up to the light. You send stories now more than warnings. One tells of a masked man who forgot how to kill and learned how to sing. Another of a guild-run city that slowly grew wildflowers through its alleys until even the shadows had to bloom. You leave these stories behind in cracks. Margins, lullabies. Not to incite revolution. To build memory. You've stopped trying to destroy the guild. They're too entrenched. Instead, you replace them one choice at a time. One silence turned into a song. One killer turned into a gardener. One Ledger turned upside down. One day, you receive a letter. No name. No seal. Just a single line. The ledger has been opened again. You don't know where. You don't know by whom. But you feel it. The world is shifting. Little more each year. And while you may not see the end of it, you will see the start. Ember takes your carving knives and begins training Kie. Not in how to stab. In how to leave something behind. She carves awkwardly. But she's steady. You teach her the rule. Nothing is wasted. Not even a misshaped figure. Imperfect things carry the fey ray. Most truth. You say. You no longer need to fight the guild. Because now, they're chasing your echo. And echoes, when loud enough, begin to drown out commands. You sit by the fire that night. 3 cups of tea. 3 candles. Ember asks if you miss it. The precision, the rules, the clarity. You think. Then you say, sometimes. But never enough to go back. She smiles. Same. Outside, the wind howls like a story looking for an ending. You let it pass. Because your story, still burning. The snow arrives and whispers. Not in a storm. Just a hush that spreads across rooftops and fields like a secret being gently passed from one grain of earth to another. Ember wakes you early to watch it. You sit together on the steps of the chapel. Ruins wrapped in wool, watching the world soften. You've come to appreciate snow. Not for its beauty, but for the quiet. It dampens sound. Slows footsteps. Makes it harder for blades to find your back. You've taught Ember that too. She still listens like an assassin, but she hears like something more. That morning, a bird lands on the chapel's windowsill. A heron, not a carving. Not a symbol. A real one. Long legs, pale feathers. Eyes like something that's seen too much. It stays for several minutes, blinking at you both. Then it flies away. Do you think that's a sign? Ember asks. You smile. It's only a sign. If we decide it is, she nods. Then adds, I think it was watching you. You don't disagree. Because the truth is, even now, even after everything, you sometimes wonder if the guild has eyes you'll never see. Not in the obvious ways, but in the quiet ones, the fable senders. The watchers who never intervene. The children, who ask strange questions, and that's fine. Let them watch. You've grown fond of being watched, not in fear, but as proof that you still matter. That your myth still unsettles someone sitting in a tall chair far away, wondering how it all got so far out of hand. Later that day, you open the old ledger again. Not because you must. Because you want to. The pages don't glow like they used to. Your name is still there. But beside it, someone has written something new. Not in ink. In pressure. As though carved by a fingernail. Changed. You run your thumb over the word. It's faint, but it's there. You think you know who did it. Not Ember. Not Kia. Someone long gone. Or perhaps someone watching from just outside the firelight. You close the book. Hide it again. But this time, you don't bury it. You place it in plain sight, tucked into a niche in the chapel wall. Because it's no longer a secret. It's a mirror. Let anyone who finds it decide what they see. Historians still argue whether the ledger was ever meant to record truth, or only utility. That its purpose was to track control, not character. But you've rewritten that. Your ledger is a record of change. In change. Like flame, doesn't ask permission. Winter deepens. The village gets quieter. Food grows scarcer. But so does the fear. No one talks about guilds anymore. They talk about signs, about the carver, about the watchers who walk among them, not to judge, but to remember. You hear stories that make you laugh. Someone says you ride a horse, made of shadows. Someone else claims Ember can walk through walls. You let the tales grow, because that's how myths spread. You've become something the guild can't reach, a story too useful to silence. One night, Ember returns from the woods with a new mark carved into her arm. Not deep, not painful. A candle, upside down. You frown. That wasn't me. She shakes her head. I found a girl outside a trade post. Said someone else showed her. You sit down heavily. Because now you know. It's begun. You are no longer the source. You are the start and the flame. It's not just surviving. It's spreading. The spring melt comes early this year. Rivulets carve new paths through the mud. and the world exhales in slow drips and thawed earth. You wake one morning to the smell of wet stone and the chatter of birds reclaiming their old perches. Ember is already outside. She's barefoot, standing in the shallows of the river, eyes closed, letting the cold run through her ankles like a benediction. You watch her for a while, not saying anything. You've grown careful with silence, not the fearful kind, but the reverent kind. The kind that says, let the moment breathe. When she opens her eyes, she says, we should move again. You raise an eyebrow. They're coming? She shakes her head. No, but others might be waiting. And she's right. The quiet has gone too still. The kind of stillness that happens before arrival. Later that day, a cart rolls into the village from the southern road. Ordinary enough. A farmer, probably, but the wheel ruts are shallow. Light. Load. And the horse doesn't smell like hay or oats. It smells like polish. Kya notices first. She knocks on the doorpost in a rhythm you all understand now. Prepare. Don't panic. You gather only the essentials. But this time, you don't leave in haste. You leave deliberately, because you know how to vanish loudly now by walking slow, heads high, through the very streets they expect you to run from. You leave. Carvings behind. One in the baker's window. A candle bent sideways. Windblown but unextinguished. Another tucked into a child's satchel. Two eyes, closed, with a tear between them. A reminder that grief is still part of the story. And finally, one burned lightly into the chapel step. A wick still lit, pressed into a palm. They'll know it's from you. They'll know you chose to move, not to flee. You take the high road. North, through the hills where stories drift slower and snow clings longer. The people along the way know you by rumors. Not names. They offer you bread. One woman gives Ember a shawl without asking why her hands are calloused like a soldier's. You make it to a town with no cathedral, no nobles, no spies. Just windmills and books. And that's where you decide to build the next chapter. Not hide. Build. You start with a bench, carved from alder. No symbols. No secrets. Then a well cover. Then a schoolroom door. Each piece you leave behind tells no one what you were, only who you are now. And the stories begin to bend. You hear a merchant tell of a man named Wick who never speaks and whose cane is a sword butt, only used to knock fruit from trees. A child swears Ember once stopped a wolf by whispering a name it had forgotten. None of it is true. All of it feels true. Because what they're building now is not a guild. It's a mythology. Historians will never find it. No names. No records. Just symbols left like breadcrumbs across forgotten maps. But in every place you've been, someone remembers the flicker of safety. And that's enough. One night, around the fire, Ember asks, what if someone lights a candle, and it doesn't help? You pause, then say, then someone else will see it, and they'll come. Because the point isn't the flame. It's the signal, the chance to be found. You fall asleep that night to the sound of snow melting from rooftops. Somewhere, far away, someone is carving a candle into wood for the first time. Not to remember you, but to remind themselves. The guild didn't write the only story. And now, the silence they built for control is filled with your echoes. The messenger arrives just before dusk. Not guild, not an initiate. Just a girl on a pony with a letter tucked into her sleeve and the exhausted look of someone who's outrun 3 cities worth of questions. She doesn't ask for payment, just water. And a place to sit down. You oblige. Of course, she eats quietly, barely tasting the bread Ember offers. When she's ready, she sets the folded parchment on the table like it might bite. You know that kind of letter. The kind that carries a choice inside. It's sealed with wax the color of dried blood. But not the fee carries of dried blood. But not the fee carries a choice inside. It's sealed with wax the color of dried blood. But not the guild sigil, a new mark, a candle upside down but with a flame still rising. You raise your eyebrows. The girl shrugs. They said you'd understand. You break the seal. Inside, a name. Yours. Underneath it, a line. If you're still alive, you're still needed. And then smaller. We're ready. You reread it 3 times. Ember leans over your shoulder. She doesn't ask what it means. She already knows. The flame has spread far enough that someone, somewhere, believes in the idea of you more than the reality. And now, they want you to lead. You lean back. Think. You never wanted this. You never trained for it. But maybe that's exactly why you're the right one. Because you don't want control. You want continuity. Ember studies you. Do we go? She asks. You answer without speaking. Because you're already packing. Not weapons. Not armor. Just your ledger. A blank one. Ready to be filled with names that matter for what they save. Not what they end. You travel for 2 weeks. Through towns that whisper your legend like a lullaby. Through checkpoints where guards give you second glances, but never speak. In one village, someone's drawn your old sigil in the dirt but turned it into a tree. Roots everywhere. A canopy of flame. You arrive at the meeting point at dawn. A ruined amphitheater, overgrown with ivy and hope. There are 30 people waiting, all different. A blind woman with a hawk on her arm. A scribe who once poisoned kings. A child, no more than 11, cradling a bundle of charcoal sketches, each one a candle burning from both ends. You stand there, the morning light catching the dust in the air. You say nothing at first, because your silence is already a speech. Then Ember steps forward and lays the blank ledger on the stone pedestal in the center. This, she says, is for those who carry light, not blades. Someone begins to cry. Another kneels. You don't stop them, but you don't raise yourself above them either. You just begin. Names. Stories. Not jobs. Remembrances. Each person who speaks adds a name, not someone they lost, but someone they saved. And as the sun climbs higher, the book begins to fill, not just with words, with purpose. Historians will never record this meeting, but years later, fragments of it will emerge. In lullabies. In woodcut prints. In scattered folk songs about the wick and the candlekeepers. Some will call it fiction. Others will follow the symbols, scratched into stone walls, and learn the truth. You lead only for as long as needed. Then you fade again, not out of fear, out of trust. Because a fire, once kindled in enough places, doesn't need tending. It becomes the weather. And when the guild hears of this gathering, they do nothing, not because they approve, but because they understand. Killing you now would only prove your story was real. And some myths, they're safer left spreading. You stay in the amphitheater for 5 days, not to lead. To listen. Because after years of moving, watching, carving, and warning, you've realized the most radical thing someone like you can do is make space. So you let others fill it. They tell their stories by firelight. Some are soft and stumbling, others cracked open like old wounds. One woman confesses she once lit the torch that burned an entire district, but only to cover a child's escape. A former tracker admits he was never sure if he was hunting or being hunted. A merchant reveals she's harbored 7 runaways without ever knowing their names. You never judge them. You simply witness. By the 3rd night, someone draws your symbol in the dirt again, but this time it's altered once more. The wick is now a path, a winding road. The flame? A star. You don't say anything, but Ember does. That's what you are now, she says. A direction. You want to argue, but can't, because she's right. They're not following you anymore. They're following what you chose, and that distinction is what keeps this movement alive. You write a new entry in the 2nd ledger. A name, not yours, just a small, careful note. They're not waiting for permission anymore. You hand the book to a scribe from the southern coast. He accepts it like it's sacred. You tell him, don't guard it, share it. Let it travel. Let the story walk on legs that were never trained to run. And then, quietly, you prepare to leave, because you know the most dangerous thing you could do now is stay. You slip away in the gray-blue of morning, Ember by your side, packs light. No destination spoken, just an understanding. It's someone else's turn. Historians might say you vanished after that you walked into a storm, and were never seen again. They'll wonder why you left, where you went, what became of the wick. But the truth, you didn't vanish. You widened. Your story became a dozen stories, then 100. Child in a mountain village who carves candles into fence posts. A former guild agent who now teaches how to spot coded ink in letters, not to kill, but to prevent. A Girl named Ember who passes through quiet towns and leaves behind symbols on rooftop stars with wicks. And you? You walk without rush. Through orchard towns, desert roads, markets no one maps. Sometimes you leave a coin, sometimes you leave a note. Once, you simply leave a carving, a heron with no wings but a long shadow. Because symbols, like people, evolve. The guild still exists, of course, but now they're reacting to rumors, to ideas, to stories they didn't write. They send watchers. They retrieve burnt pages. They whisper about a ghost who teaches silence as a weapon, but also as a refuge. They begin to mimic you, which is how you know they're losing. Because once power imitates myth, the myth is winning. One afternoon, in a city you've never named aloud, you find a candle in a shop window. It's carved into the shape of an open hand. Beside it, a note. Leave what you know. Take what you need. You leave a sketch, a phrase, a lesson. And you take only a piece of thread. Frayed, golden. Useless. Or maybe a beginning. Because someone will find it. Ask what it meant, and someone else will answer. That was one of his. They'll mean you, but they'll get it wrong. Because it never was about you. It was always about the ones who came next. And you've given them the one thing the guild never could. The permission to choose. You settle in a valley that has no name on the maps. Not because you're hiding. Those days are gone, but because nameless places invite fewer questions. You rent a quiet cabin from a family who doesn't care where you've been, only whether. You can mend a roof and teach their youngest to read. You can. So you stay. Ember doesn't stay with you, not exactly. She comes and goes. She's become something else, now more spark than shadow. Sometimes weeks pass without a sign, then suddenly she's on your porch with a new scarf and a handful of stories about what's growing. There's a boy in the mountains, she says, who never speaks, but carves tiny birds into coins and trades them for bread. There's a weaver in the east who sends tapestries stitched with hidden names people the guild forgot to finish. There's a blind smith who makes swords that no one ever uses, but keeps selling out anyway. Ember doesn't smile when she tells you these stories. She glows, because she knows now. She's the myth, too, and it's moving without you. One morning, a young woman appears at your door. She's nervous, hands trembling. Her boots are worn through, but her voice is steady when she asks, "Are you the one they call Wick?" You nod. Slowly. She exhales. Then, "I don't want to be like them. I want to be like you." You say nothing. Instead, you pour tea, offer her food, let her sit in the quiet. She doesn't speak again until the third cup. I was raised in the KA system. I did everything right. I rose. They told me I was ready, that I'd be cleaner than the ones before. But I broke. She pulls a token from her SATCHEL. Not a coin, not a dagger, just a candle, carved, crude, but unmistakable. "I followed your trail," she says. "I didn't think you'd be real." You tell her what you've told others. "I was real when I chose not to be them." And you let her stay, just for a while. She tends the garden. She writes her dreams on scraps of bark. She hums when she forgets you're listening. You teach her what you can. Not how to disappear, but how to exist. One night, Ember returns. Watches. The girl in silence. Later, beside the fire, she says, "She reminds me of you. From the days when you still flinched." You nod. Then you reach for the second ledger. It's thicker now. Heavier. Not just with names, but symbols. Stories. Half-finished confessions. Sketches of faces, remembered only by scent or laughter. You write one more line. "Some who follow us walk faster. Good. Let them pass." Historians may never agree on how long you lived. Some say you vanished before the guild fell. Others believe you still wander, showing up in places where silence grows too heavy, tipping the scales with a whisper. And a fire lit under someone's ribcage. But truth? You stayed long enough to see your myth outgrow your shadow, and long enough to let go. One spring morning, you leave the cabin unlocked. The garden half-weeded. The fire still warm. No note. No message. Just a candle on the windowsill. Wick unburned. And Beside it, a carving of two people walking in opposite directions, both smiling, because you weren't meant to stay forever. You were meant to start at dot, and now others walk your path, their own way, their own story, their own flame. No one knows exactly when the guild fell. There's no final strike, no fiery collapse, no triumphant banner raised over smoldering ruins. Just silence, gradual, almost respectful, like a powerful old house that chose one day to close its own shutters. You hear about it in pieces. A courier arrives at a market stall and forgets to check over his shoulder. A known guild enclave turns into a hospice. A former handler opens a bakery and, when asked why, says, "I got tired of breadlines." Being metaphors. The fear doesn't disappear, but it shifts, because people begin to realize something the guild never prepared for. The stories changed the rules, and when the rules change, so do the kings. Ember visits you one last time before you vanish for good. You sit together beside a lake, so still it mirrors everything too clearly. She brings news, as always. They're forming something new, not a guild, not even a network, just shared trust, shared remembrance. You nod. That's more dangerous than anything we ever built. She smiles. That's why I'm staying. You hand her your last carving. It's rough deliberately so. A figure with no face, holding an open book and a candle burning from both ends. She runs her thumb along the edge. What's this one called? You think for a moment, then say, the one who didn't finish the story. Ember frowns. Because it ended. No, you say. Because someone else is still writing it. She holds it close. Doesn't speak. You both watch the sun dip. Low, shadows lengthening like gentle farewells, and then she leaves, not with sorrow, not with hesitation. She leaves like someone who knows the flame behind her is now strong enough to light roads she never walked. Historians will call this time the Ember Years. They'll write about how assassination guilds gave way to networks of protectors, quiet witnesses, myth-weavers. Some will say it was chaos. Others will say it was mercy finding its voice. But those closest to the truth will know. It began with someone who walked away and kept walking, even when the path disappeared. Someone who chose regret over routine. Someone who planted silence where knives once bloomed. And someone who lit the first candle not to see better, but so others could find their way in. You were that someone. And now, your name belongs to the wind. Not lost. Carried. In symbols scratched beneath window sills. In whispers past a crossroads. In the way a hand moves to shield, not strike. And one day, somewhere, someone will ask, why didn't any of them live long enough to regret it? And a quiet voice will answer, one did. They still tell your story in strange ways. A children's rhyme in the lowlands warns, Wick walks backward. Watch your tongue. Lies burn quick and truths weigh tons. In the mountains, they light candles in storm glass, each wick dipped in salt to keep it slow burning. No one remembers who started that ritual. They just call it keeping watch. An archivist in the eastern port collects every mention of you. Not to canonize, not to prove, but to listen. She says your story hums differently in different places. Like a melody carried across wind and water, always familiar, never exact. Once, a rogue scholar ex-guild writes a treatise titled The Assassins Who Forgot How to Kill. It's banned before circulation, but a single copy survives, buried in a monk's apothecary, its spine worn thin by fingers that never admit to reading. And every few years, someone spots you, or someone like you, a figure on a bridge during a flood, offering only a hand, a quiet guest in a roadside inn who leaves behind a knife, turned into a flute. A masked performer in a market square who tells the story of the assassin who chose not to finish the job and made the world blink. Historians argue. Still. They wonder if you were one person or many, if the movement had a founder, or if it was just inevitable. They dig up ruins, decode letters, cross-reference shadows, but the ones who truly understand, they don't argue, they walk, they light, they listen, and somewhere, a new page turns. It's not inked with blood. It's inked with soot and wax, and the gentle curl of handwriting too careful to rush. Another story begins, not with violence. Not with revenge. But with a question, whispered in the dark. What if there's still time to choose differently? That's your legacy. Not the missions. Not the myths. But the pause. The space between command and act. Between shadow and strike. Where thought lives. You opened that space. Held it open. And now? The world fits through it. Slowly. Unevenly. But enough. So. When people say, no assassin ever lived long enough to regret it, they're still mostly right. But what they forget, what you proved, is that sometimes regret is the beginning. Not the end. You reach the last place you'll ever go. It's not dramatic. No cliffs, no ruins, no thundering skies. Just a clearing tucked between trees that lean like old friends. The grass is soft. The air smells like pine and stories that no one has told yet. You sit. No rush. There's no one chasing you now. No signal to send. No identity to shed. Just stillness and the faint memory of movement. You light a small fire. Not to signal. Not to hide. Just to feel the warmth. The ledger, the second one, is tucked beside you. You haven't written in it for months. Not because the story ended, but because you realized it doesn't need your hand anymore. Others are writing now. Better. You open to the last page anyway. One line. Let this be the quiet they feared most. You smile, a little crooked, a little tired, but peaceful, because that was always the secret. The guild thought silence was emptiness, but you knew it was potential. A blank space in which something softer, truer, more terrifying than violence could grow. And it did. In corners and cupboards, in train cars and bakeries, in people who looked ordinary until they chose not to be. You'll never see the full bloom of what you started, but that's fine. You didn't plant it to be seen. You planted it so someone else could breathe. And now, the sky dims. The wind hushes. Your eyes grow heavy, not from fear or watchfulness, but from rest that finally feels earned. Let them wonder where you went. Let them draw symbols, write songs, whisper versions of you in alleyways and lullabies. You were never the point. The choice was. The candle you lit wasn't meant to last. It was meant to catch. And it did. Now, others carry the flame. Across time. Across doubt. Across nights darker than yours ever were. And they do it without needing your name. Which means you did it right. You lie back. Feel the earth cradle you. There's nothing left to run from. Nothing left to fix. Only the hush of leaves. The crackle of fading fire. And the slow, long breath of a world that, for once, doesn't need your shadow to remember the light. The fire has gone out now. Its final warmth drifts into the soil, gentle and forgotten, like a memory that doesn't need to be remembered to still matter. The candle, too, has burned low. A faint ribbon of smoke curls into the night, spiraling, then dissolving, no different from breath or mist or the last line of a well-loved story. You've reached the end. Not of everything. Just of this. The forest holds its hush around you. Nothing calls. Nothing crashes. There is only the soft rhythm of rest settling over roots and rock. Even the wind has stopped asking where you're going, and maybe that's the point. Not all journeys end in arrival. Some simply end. So you let go. Of names, of regrets, of paths you could have walked. You leave them here, beneath this quiet sky, like tools you no longer need. And in their place, silence. Not empty. Full. Full of the lives you touched. The choices you altered. The myth you allowed to outgrow you. They carry you now. In coins passed hand to hand. In stories whispered on rooftops. In the flicker of a candle placed beside a child's bed with no explanation. Just a feeling that someone once chose. Gentleness. And that it mattered. So sleep now. You've done enough. The wick may be gone, but the light, still moving, still reaching, still enough.